Doesn't look like G or James are with us today, so I'll go ahead and get the meeting started. Let me share my screen. Okay, so first on the agenda today, let's discuss the next, actually we could save that for next week, whether we should cancel the 4th of July meeting or not. For this week, metrics from CSI Plugin. This is a proposal from Hemant. Hemant, are you on the line? It doesn't look like he is. I think the metrics that we are most interested in from the Kubernetes side are basically capacity stats. How much used, how much free, what the total capacity is for a given volume. I think Hemant summarized it well in this thread, where we could do DU or stat on one of these volumes, but it might be better to let the volume let the volume plugin figure out what is the best way to be able to get that information. And then G proposed extending the existing get capacity call to support this. It seems reasonable to me. I think the only problem is that the existing get capacity call is designed to return the capacity of the entire pool, not for a given volume. So we'll have to figure that out, but seems like a reasonable approach. Any comments, suggestions, concerns? Okay, if there are any other comments, questions, concerns, please take it to this thread and we can carry on there.
Another possibility may be use the list volume. I don't know which one is better though.
List volume versus get capacity?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. I think the problem with get capacity is that currently it's not per volume. List volume will return volume attributes. Capacity could be one of those attributes, so that seems reasonable.
Yeah, I agree. Get capacity is a cluster-wide thing.
Okay, I don't think that one's very controversial. Once there's a concrete proposal, we can come back to that. Next, I think, was a general discussion about mount options. So I believe on the Kubernetes side, we allow mount options to be specified for the equivalent of a node publish call. And I thought, yeah, I guess we didn't support that on the, we do have mount flags. Yeah, we'll have to sync back with Hemant to see what his intention here was. Maybe mount flags is insufficient or it's not being implemented correctly in the CO. Okay, and I don't believe Jan is on the call either, but he wanted to talk about secrets in controller unpublished volume. I'm not sure what exactly he wanted to talk about there. If anybody else knows, feel free to speak up. Otherwise, we'll just defer this to next time.
I think the gist was, it was about we'd originally intended that it should be possible to make a very simple implementation that doesn't store its own state.
Mhm.
So if you need extra information in order to unpublish something, you need credentials or something in order to get the unpublished done. And the plugin doesn't have its own backing store, then it's convenient for those secrets to get passed. The same kinds of information that we passed to publish, we also passed to unpublish. And that was how we originally had it. And then we took it out for simplicity, just because we thought, why would anybody ever need that? But apparently he's got a case where he needs it in order for his particular implementation. So,
Looks like it's already in there.
Yeah, I think it was it. I don't know if it was. I think it was kind of. I thought that the thread was essentially the metadata, the volume info, but maybe I'm getting my wires crossed. So we should just wait.
Okay, we can sync up.
Yeah, I'm not sure about what his issue is, but I do feel like, do you mind share why we don't put credentials in node side unpublished calls, like node unpublished and node on stage, but on the control side unpublished calls?
I think the general idea is that control plane calls are much more likely to require credentials compared to node local calls. So mounting and unmounting is unlikely to require credentials, whereas mounting could require credentials, but unmounting probably doesn't. The credentials on the mount side are things like what you should use to decrypt a volume. But on the controller unpublished side, there may be some sort of credentials required for the control plane operation. I believe that was the reasoning. I forget if we didn't end up adding secrets here. The idea was if somebody really had a concrete use case, we would revisit this and add it in later if needed.
Actually, well, so I'm working on like implementing like CSI related featuring methods, and one thing I feel like I'm actually prefer having no credentials, at least on the no side. The reason is that in the current CSI spec, if say a publish or unpublished returns an error, and that error is not listed like on spec, so for example some internal error, or like we have a couple of errors that the current list of errors in the current spec is not a comprehensive list, right?
Right.
Yeah. So in case we handle that error, the spec specifically say that we can use unpublished, like in all three type of unpublished. Like if we have control publish and publish error, we use control unpublished to kind of recover. If for stage, we use node on stage to recover. For non-published and non-published, we use non-published to recover. So these are the only guarantee that I can assume to be called safely, and the plugin should behave properly.
Right.
To recover. And if the credentials are involved, the recovery will be more like complicated.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. So I'm okay leaving it as is unless there's a concrete reason somebody has to basically add it here. I think maybe Jan's question might be around removing it from the node, from the controller unpublished as well. Unclear. We'll punt it to next time and see what his argument is.
I just joined.
Oh, there you are.
I'm sorry, I'm late.
No problem.
All the other unpublished calls don't have any secrets. And I find it kind of weird that this one is so special than it has it. And in Kubernetes, we have some implementation problems with this in some pathological states. When Kubernetes just is sure that it doesn't want this volume attached because nobody uses it, but it doesn't remember anymore who was it. Well, it remembers who was it, but it doesn't have its secrets already. So my question would be, why is the secret there in the first place?
So I think the idea was that for the control plane operations, some plugins could require a secret in order to complete the control plane operation, and that was symmetric for both the publish and unpublish. And I think we did the same thing for create and delete. So if you look at delete,
Yes, it is there.
yeah. So the idea was for all the control plane operations, we would have secrets on both the request and the response. On the create and delete, or the each symmetric call.
Yeah, my reasoning for removing is that the credentials are there to validate the identity of the user who wants to attach the volume or control or publish the volume. But once the user is allowed to attach it, then why do we need to check it again for detaching?
I think it was sort of along the lines of, if you imagine a multi-tenancy environment where, for example, you're running in GCP, detach in this case is going to be dissociating a storage device from some VM, right? So you need somebody's credentials in order to do that. If it's single tenant, then it's easy to have a single set of credentials for doing that kind of operation. But in a multi-tenant environment, maybe you actually need credentials to tell GCP, go detach this thing from that thing. And
this kind of credentials you have in the driver, you don't get them from the CO.
Right. Yeah,
So in GCE or AWS, the plugin must have some credentials to talk to the Amazon API or Google API, but these are driver's credentials, not user's credentials.
So actually, I can share a little bit of experience from the Mesa side. So actually, in this series, we have in Mesa we have a secret resolver module that actually can grant us access to some secret store. So the operator can store the credentials in a secret store, and the Mesas will retrieve the secret and then pass it to the plugin. That's how we resolve this.
Do you have an issue of potentially losing the secret, so that when you go to detach, you don't have the secret and are unable to complete the detach operation?
Can you say again?
Do you have the issue of potentially losing your secret after you complete the controller publish, and then at some point when you want to do a controller unpublish, then you don't have the secret available and are unable to complete the controller unpublished? Do you have any case?
So, well, actually, the credential part is still in scope. We're still designing it, so it's not like fully implemented yet. But our scope is more about for controller related credential. It's probably owned by the operator. So, and will we lose it? So it will. Yeah, we need to. That I just briefly described the plan we want to store it, but
Sure.
there are some details we haven't like make it make the whole design out yet. Yeah.
Okay, so unclear, but maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would imagine just in general, if we require plugins to store their own secrets and we don't provide them an API in CSI to do that, then you're going to end up with a lot of CO specific plugins that, for example, call back into the Kubernetes API to go store and look stuff up, because securely storing secrets is non-trivial, right? And most COs have a way of doing it, but they're all different. So I think we need to be thoughtful about just making the assumption that, ooh, every plugin's gonna store the secret it used to attach something so that it has it on hand to detach it, because I think that means either the plugin is gonna be doing
I agree
something.
with that. We want to avoid anything that would lead to CO-specific plugins. I'm not sure this would. I would think if a plugin requires credentials on the unpublished controller unpublished, and it received them on the controller published, potentially it could store them and then reuse them. But regardless, I think.
But that secure storage is a non-trivial problem, right? And
Yes.
we have it solved in every CO. So
What
I
I would
think
like to see is, are there actually concrete use cases for this? It sounds like AWS and GCP credentials for the control plane are going to be directly injected into the driver. Do we have a use case of requiring separate credentials on the controller unpublished side?
Cinder's the only case I'm aware of that requires credentials on unpublished. The other pitfall with secrets is, I mean, what if a secret changes and it's outside like the mount on mount call? You pass it in and say, hey, remount this, the secret changed?
I mean, typically what we do is when a operation happens for mount, you use the secret at that time. If it changes in the future, we're not going to do anything special to handle that. You're saying Cinder might require it. Jan, are you familiar with the Cinder use case?
Well, I know how it works. You can have multi-tenants there, and each tenant could have its own secrets, but I'm not sure how would I deploy Kubernetes there. It would be just one tenant, in my opinion. Well, most probably, I'm not sure. As far as I know, that Red Hat deploys it just as a single tenant.
I do like the argument that the CO should be able to clean up when things go bad. And, you know, I don't have the secret anymore. I just don't want these attachments sitting around. I should be able to probe the plugin and say, please clean this up without having to pass in credential information. But I can also buy the counter argument that it makes it more difficult for the plugin. If it does require credentials, it now has to have some sort of store to save the secret. And then the second argument that there is a concrete use case potentially here.
Yeah, I'm clearly getting my wires crossed, but I could swear somebody was just making the argument that we should have secrets in more of these API calls. So,
we had, and they were deleted in one PR.
yeah, right. And we thought, well, maybe it's okay. And we were trying to err on the side of
Less is more.
less, and then we can always add later.
You can try it again.
I guess the other issue to consider if we're thinking about removing this is that would be a breaking change, right?
Yes.
And to me, it's not really worth it. But
how difficult will it be to support on the Kubernetes side, Jan? Or actually, it sounds like this issue is probably going to be encountered by all the COs.
I talked to Jordan today, which is our secret guru, and it looks okay. We can deal with that. Well, we won't deal with that, but if somebody deletes the secret before detach, then it's his fault.
Yeah.
You can blame the user.
And we could possibly do something with finalizers like we did with EDP.
You can force them.
Yeah, basically don't allow them to delete a secret while it's in use.
You can remove them and force delete objects in Kubernetes, so it can help much.
So you could always get into that case.
I had a quick question. What did we say we do if the secret had changed between the operations?
Nothing. The secret is used when an operation happens. If it changes between operations, nothing special happens.
So then the unpublished will just continue to fail, right?
Unpublished will get whatever the current value of the secret is. If that happens to be incorrect, it will fail.
Okay.
And it's the responsibility of the user to fix it. I think we're kind of saying for this use case that Jan raised, that may be the answer. It's not ideal, but that may be the answer.
Okay. And so at least in Kubernetes, will it be fairly trivial for the user to figure out the mapping, like labeled or something like that?
What do you mean figure out the mapping?
Like the secret for corresponding to a volume. I was just thinking about like an Azure use case where Azure disks might be in different storage accounts, each of them with their own access key.
Uh-huh.
Those secrets are stored as like individual secrets.
Right.
So if we have a CSI plugin for Azure Disk, will it, I guess like someone should be able to enumerate all the secrets and figure out from there, like, okay, this is the secret for my,
right. I mean, yeah, there is a mechanism by which you can add secrets in Kubernetes, list secrets, and then when you have a PVPVC, you can specify what secrets should be used for your CSI driver. That mechanism exists today. I think what the open question is, well, you know, if we require secrets both on the controller publish and controller unpublished call, you know, we can use the secret on the controller publish call, but the user may go in and delete that secret after it's created, or you know, something might happen and the CO loses its mind and loses that secret for some reason, and we now need to clean up. How do we do that? If the cleanup process requires a secret, we're kind of stuck. One answer is that, well, too bad, you know, this is the user's fault and they need to come in and fix it. That's not ideal. We want to be as automated as possible, but on the other hand, the option is to remove it completely from the API, and if we do that, then we put a greater burden on the plugins to try and maintain this information. So I don't think either option is great, given that it's already the way it is. The path of least resistance is to leave it as is.
yeah, I think we have a whole class of problems like that go beyond storage, right?
Yeah.
I mean, stuff rotates or stuff changes out of band and the CO doesn't know about it. It's you know, the way that we tend to kind of quote unquote solve it is just say, oh, just tear down your workloads and restart them.
Yeah. Yeah, the only drawback here, I think, is the fact that it requires manual intervention to fix. When you have clusters that are large enough, when things like this start going wrong, they add up very quickly and multiply, and requiring manual intervention to fix is usually a terrible answer.
Yeah, so that's kind of an argument to not not rely on that secrets mechanism, right? If you don't need to,
Right.
ideally your driver should have everything it needs in order to get its work done. But
if you want to make a robust driver, you should not require secrets on the unpublished side. I guess that's a good argument that if you are going to write a volume plugin and it does require secrets on the unpublished side, there are these potential edge cases where you could get stuck and require manual intervention, and that'll be not good for your users. So be careful when you develop your plugin. Can we add a warning in the controller unpublished secret saying if a plugin requires this, it's possible that it may not be available and that the unpublished call won't succeed, so be careful. Anybody against that?
That could work. Like the driver should rely on this only when it doesn't have any other choice.
Right.
Would the better practice be to put this secret in, was it volume options, the opaque properties?
Sorry, what do you mean?
Yeah, there's an opportunity for the driver to provide some volume options that are persisted by the CO, right? And they could cache the secret in that.
The challenge there is like you don't want to put secret information there in the raw because it could get exposed.
Well, right. So that's the interesting thing of those properties. Like, how secure are they?
Yeah, we explicitly, I believe, said on those properties you should not use them to pass around sensitive information. They could be logged, they could be viewed via the API. Just don't do it.
I mean, if I was writing a really robust Kubernetes CSI driver, I would probably have my own watch events on the secrets, right? And respond to the events.
I mean, my argument would be that if you're writing a really robust CSI volume plugin, you're going to have your own internal store that you use to persist state. You don't rely on the CO to persist state for you.
Right, right.
Realistically, it can't. And I think if stepping back a little bit, what you're suggesting would be using the CO to store the state, making Kubernetes store the secret temporarily on the plugin's behalf. We had a big, long discussion about this, about whether the CO should have, in the CSI interface, we can add methods to allow the CO to be used to persist state. Ultimately, we decided not to do that. And we decided that the plugins, if they need to persist state, would basically have their own store that they would store, that they would use for store, not the CO's store.
That's what I'm poking at here is, there's two better designs. One would be watching the secrets in the CO directly, which would have special cases for Kubernetes, Mesos, whatever. The other design would be have secrets persisted inside the plugin, have some kind of statements inside the plugin directly. But what it seems like we're designing is like a third mediocre option, right? So maybe we didn't have this at all and just force them to do one of the two better things.
I mean, we're not designing a third option. It's basically an option that is available. If you're implementing a volume plugin, you can choose to be tied to a specific CO and go and directly talk to the CO secret store to do whatever you need to do. You can choose to be CO agnostic, but in order to do that, you should maintain your own store. If you require some sort of state between different operations. And then this third option is if you also want to be agnostic to COs and don't want to maintain your own state, you have this other option of a very shitty implementation.
If you enjoy kernel plugins.
Yeah. Ultimately, I think it's up to the plugin designer to decide that.
So in the third option, where would the secret be persisted?
In the third option, it wouldn't be persisted. This plugin would basically just fail in that case.
Okay.
Okay, so are there any objections against just adding a warning to the existing controller unpublished, indicating that it should only be used if absolutely needed, and if it is used, it may not be passed in, and unpublished could get stuck? Jan, are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay. All right. Let's move on. Hamant, are you on the call?
Yes, I'm on the call. Sorry, I was joined late.
Awesome, no problem. We could go over your items from earlier. We quickly skimmed over it. So metrics for CSI Plugin. It seems like the metrics that we're most interested in are related to capacity.
Yeah.
And then I think G proposed extending the get capacity call. I think the only concern that we raised on the call was that the get capacity call is currently a cluster-wide operation and it's not volume specific. So somebody suggested extending the volume object that we have today. Any thoughts on that?
The list volume object, I think that will work. It's just the list volume is, I think, control plane, or like it's more like a control level call. We'll need. We might. I mean, preferable thing to here will be to get something at the node. The capacity is more related to nodes, so it'll be like preferable to get something at the node level. And that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, that makes sense because if for a lot of volume plugins, in order to get the capacity, they're basically just going to do a DU operation
or stat.
Or stat, yeah, and that would have to happen on the node.
Yeah, so
I imagine there may be some class of volume plugins where it's a control plane operation, maybe.
Right now, we don't have a use case for that. Like, I mean, at least in Kubernetes, we don't have anyone that does that. Maybe, like, obviously, like for something like EBS and all, they report their own capacity users. So it's possible to report something there, but we don't that much care about the values reported there. So we are more interested in what is reported from the node. So
is there any? Go ahead.
Sorry. Oh, so that also means we probably need the volume to be published on the node if we want to use those metrics.
Volumes we publish, as in like controller publish, like, or
I mean node publish. If we want to use DU, well, I think it makes sense to have something from the node because it's the source of truth. But then we also need to think about, okay, under what situation we can use these metrics on what volumes.
I didn't get the last part. Sorry.
Like for example, if a volume is no longer node published, maybe you cannot just DU it, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And but the problem that'll be in that case is like we are in many cases it depends on the implementation. Like we are interested in file system specific metrics. In some cases it will be like, so 5 GB volume gets created to 4 GB. on the disk when the file system is created and only 2 GB is available. So what we report when it is not published on a node could be like incorrect. So I haven't seen a use case of like our like users haven't really needed that like so far, and I'm just worried that if we provide something, what we provide will be not 100% correct actually. And so I would rather think that not do that and just have like the available from node. One of the ways that some of this like it depends on the particular way like how the CO is going to consume or use the metric. It could persist from the last seen node, and then it could assume that's the case. Obviously, that's what we do in Kubernetes right now. Like from the last seen node, where what was the volume reported, and that's the capacity available on the PVC, or similar thing we could do in CSI, and I think that will work.
Yeah, if we depend on a node operation in order to fetch the capacity information, we have to make certain assumptions. For example, it must only be called during a fully published state, things like that.
Yeah, I think that is fine. So I think sounds like we're going to need a new RPC call rather than like just using one of the existing ones, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that seems to be the case.
All right. So yeah. So I'll go ahead and add it and open up a more concrete proposal with the details, and then we can take it up in the next meeting, or like we can discuss this offline on the PR.
Yeah, this sounds to me like it's volume information, right?
Yes.
So it sounds to me like you're saying something like get volume info. This is just one of the information parameters that you will get, right?
Oh yeah.
So do you get all the things back? Like you provide the volume ID and you will get back other information? I'm just trying to make sure that, I don't know if we've talked about this before, or if not, we leave it open to any information to come from the future. It's just a packet of information returned by the plugin.
Okay. Okay. That kind of makes sense, but I just it means basically that the response that we return is open for extension. It shouldn't be like a closed interface. I think that sounds fine.
I think the challenge of sticking it into volume info might be the lifecycle. Currently, volume info doesn't have any restrictions around when it can be requested or returned, whereas this capacity information, as I understand it, must only be requested after a successful node publish and cannot be requested outside of that state. That may mean that we need a different RPC because their life cycles are different, but I'll leave that for you to explore.
Yeah, I was just suggesting, because it could be that volume info returns, like, the volume isn't available yet, but I'm just trying to keep it simple to implement, because then the message can be messed with, but the RPC calls are there. So
yeah, I agree. If at all we can reuse one of the existing operations, I would be all for that. Okay, let's move on. So the second question was about mount options. I think we were unclear what the problem was. So I think there's a mount flags field today. Hemant, do you want to?
I think I completely missed that flag. I apologize. I think we can just I crossed the item out of it.
Okay. Cool. And now we can move on to finalizing resize. I don't believe James or G are on the line, and I think they had a lot of comments on it, so I'm not sure how productive this will be, but let's open it up.
Yeah, I think so. James has left some comments about I think the main concern was flexing out how the when in the life cycle this plugin will be called. Sorry, the node expand volume will be called, and I have clarified it. And like, if you just read that one, that'll be like, I have clarified it a lot. There's a the problem is like specifically between node stage volume and node publish volume, when this gets called, I have tried to not use the must word there, like you must use after node stage or you must use after. The problem is that a plugin, a CO may decide to call this between node stage and after node stage, but before node publish, or he might decide to call it after node publish. So it's like I have used the word may there, and I think that makes more sense in case user, like in some cases, like when the pod is just when the workload is just starting on the node, then the CO may want to call resize node expand volume after node stage volume. But if CO is doing resize of a already running workload in use volume, then he might want to call node expand volume after both node stage and node publish has been called already. So the point is like the wording that I have tried to explain is not 100% prescriptive. It's more like this is like you're supposed to do. And I don't know if James and had any concern about that, but
So, well, I feel about the wording, I feel means give the CO more flexibility, but that also means the plugin developer need to be able to deal with all possible situations that when CO call this from this method. Instead, if you use must, it give the plugin developer a clear instruction about, okay, you only need to handle this call under these situations. But then it's restrict how CO calls it. So I feel just some trade-off between the wording.
I think I understand what you're saying, but the problem is like there's most plugins will support online resizing, for example. So when it gets called, like it's either in between nodes, it's basically either in between node stage and node publish or after both of them. And it's like the plugins will support both the cases. If they don't, then yeah, it's like they'll have to kind of throw an error, like, okay, the one of the error that is the failed precondition error.
Could we have just the cases that you mentioned here, like the workload just started versus workload is already running, enumerate those and then use the stronger language? Or is that just too difficult to capture all the possible cases?
Yeah, it becomes a little bit too verbose, I feel like if I try to capture all the permutation and combination at which this node expand volume could be called. I have tried, and it's already becoming long, and maybe that's not a problem, but like here, if you read this thing, like it's already kind of, if plugin has stage unstage volume node capability, the node expand volume may be called after node stage volume. If plugin does not have stage unstage volume node, the node expand volume may be called after node publish volume. So it's a kind of already growing big. So I'm just trying to, so the two cases of online, and there's a statement for online also. Node expand may also be called to perform online expansion of in-use volume.
So actually, I was wondering, could you give me like what's an example about like a workload is already running and someone resize the volume? Is that the workload itself want to resize the volume, or it's like someone else can alter resize volume and then workload detect that resize and use more disk?
No, it's the second case. Like that's you can do both, but this thing was designed is like for like let's say you're running MySQL and you have a workload running with MySQL Power and you're growing out of disk space, then yeah, you could do online resize, call node expand volume, and the new disk space is immediately available to you, the MySQL database. So that is what this the online resizing talks about.
I see. It's more like we have long running service. We don't stop it, but we want to like expand this is like free like available this space on the fly.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it. And Kubernetes can do this right now.
Yeah. So we sort of like implemented a alpha feature for online in last release, but we'll take it beta next release. So yeah.
I see. Thanks.
Do folks on this call have a strong opinion one way or the other?
I think a lot. I'm just like a little bit confused about how to word this properly so that it's like the RPC calls are clear and you know, like all this. I think those
So
concerns.
it sounds like James might be the one who's has a strong opinion about this. Maybe you can set up a quick meeting with him to just iron out exactly what type of wording he's looking for and come to some sort of compromise.
All right.
So I would prefer more explicitness. Either we have more restriction, or if we want to use may, we probably want to call it out that the plugin should behave properly whenever the CO is allowed to call this call, right? So it's we probably want to make the wording that plugin independent.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And there's yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's not that we don't use may word in the spec, by the way. I'm just trying to find a previous
There are some may words, like when something failed, the CO may call unpublished, etc., etc.
I mean, ultimately, we can't get too principled about things and get so far into hypothetical, theoretical territory that it becomes impractical. We need to make sure we focus on concrete use cases and use those concrete use cases to define our language. So let's set up another small meeting. Feel free to pull me into that, Hemant, as well. And it sounds like Chung is also interested. If anybody else is interested, ping Hemant, and he'll pull you into a meeting, and then we can work on revising the wording and come up with something that hopefully we all agree on. I think for the most part, we all agree on what the use case is. We just want to make sure that the wording doesn't accidentally put us either on the CO side or on the plugin side into some space where we can't actually support what's written. So let's make sure we get that right, and we'll focus on doing that offline.
All right, sounds good. I'll schedule something between James, you, and Chang.
Cool. Are there any other comments, questions, concerns for today?
Chang, can you type your email ID in the chat just in case?
Oh, sure. Thank you.
All right, folks, we will call it today and meet same time next week. All right, take care.
Is it going to be next week, 4th of July?
Good.
Sorry, no, next week is okay.
Yeah, next week we're okay. The following week is 4th of July.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
All right, take care, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.
Yeah.